Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the last session of the bootcamp. We are on the 12th day, and we do have the Ask Me Anything panel with all the experts here and all the pillars and the foundation behind this Data Cloud bootcamp. And I thank everyone, along with all the speakers involved in this bootcamp, for making this bootcamp possible and also making this bootcamp the most effective way. And thank you, everyone, for sticking with us throughout the journey. So if you haven't attended any of the sessions, this is the schedule that we have followed. We have covered all the exam topics, which are on the exam guide for the Data Cloud Consultant certification. So all the sessions are recorded and uploaded to the YouTube channel. So if you have missed any of these sessions, you can go and watch the sessions there. And we do have the deep dive sessions planned. Some of these are yet to be scheduled. And these sessions, we have more implementation oriented and use case scenarios with the detailed demos. And the timing for these is a slightly changed. This is going to be at 8 a.m. Eastern instead of 9 p.m. Eastern. So if you are already part of the Phoenix marketers group, then you will get notified whenever a new event is created. So most of the events are created so far. You can go and register to all the events here. And we do have the workshop, the Build With Us sessions, where there will be a practical use case, and we will get started with the configuration to all the steps of the Data Cloud implementation. I also see some questions related to some sessions like this. So we have already planned for these, and this schedule is yet to be decided. So this is coming up next. And as mentioned before, we do have some swags. So for this 12-day bootcamp, we have 3 certification vouchers and 1 swag item. So we will be confirming the winners at the end of this session. So please stay along. And for the 2 other series as well, the deep dive and the workshop, we do have the same certification vouchers and 1 swag item. So we will start with the questions that are already filled out in the form prior. And if we have time, we'll get to address the questions that are in the chat. So if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. And if you're not already part of the Slack channel, here's the Slack channel. So we will have all the communications going on regarding this bootcamp and all the questions on this Slack channel. So with that, Vlad, I'm going to kick it off with the questions. You want to say a few words before we get started, or we are good to get started?
Probably not me. I was more thinking, I don't know, we didn't really decide who's going to go and take the short story and start, but good to be here along Arvind and Matt. I think it's just amazing that we'll get quite a few people following through all these sessions in the bootcamp, so congrats and well done. We certainly hope that you'll learn a lot and help you with your not just certification, but really more learning journey on understanding and knowing Data Cloud, what it does, and where it fits. And some of the questions that we've seen so far, I think they just highlight the fact that it's an interesting topic to discuss. So we'll certainly try to answer all the questions, or at least as many as we can today.
So I have kept these questions open, so it's easy to refer to. So I will start with the first one. How is the data governance achieved in Data Cloud?
That's a super big and super broad question. And there's so many different facets that we could spend the next 90 minutes talking about where Data Cloud fits into data governance, because, you know, I mean, where to begin? I mean, certainly, I would say Data Cloud needs to have data governance involved. It needs to have a data stewardship plan in place. Where it fits is it needs it. That's the lifeblood that's going to sustain it. And so, you know, it's going to be made better by having good data governance policies in place, that are going to govern things like data quality. You know, are we connecting to you know, valid sources that have been standardized, and can we trust the data that's coming from all of these systems? You know, Data Cloud's not actually like creating a lot of new data, but So the data that's being fed we need to be able to trust that, we need to make sure that that data is secure. And so there's like right now, like, I can kind of explain current state in terms of security and in terms of access control. It lives in hyperforce, which means the data is going to be, encrypted in rest and in transit. When it comes to access control, let's say that it's safe to say there's not a lot right now. We can restrict access to data within a data space, and people that have access to that data space have access to the data they're in. What's on the roadmap that's coming that will build a little bit more granularity in terms of access control once someone is in data cloud, of course, is going to be providing access to things like I guess I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but there are more things to be able to control, like tagging of data, and being able to create more policies around what types of information can be shared based off of how that information that's being ingested is tagged. Like I said, data governance is huge. These are just a few things that are kind of top of mind. Lots and lots of other things to cover. Vlad, Arvind, are there ones you guys want to cover within governance?
No, I mean, I know like we have lots of questions here, so maybe let's go through them. But I'll just say this: like, data cloud is not meant to be a data governance tool, but it'll definitely, apply data governance. There are best of breed tools out there that does data governance, but as part of implementing data cloud, you kind of have to factor that. So if you saw some of our earlier sessions, we say audit your source data, make sure you have a clear understanding. So I would say like data governance can mean different things to different people, like what it is. So you need to sort of see what exactly, but data cloud can be a consumer of that.
That's great, Arvind. So we'll move on to the next one. When we have multiple sources of data and using data cloud, how we will show unified view of a customer? There might be a chances of having multiple values for one field like email, phone, address, etc.
And I can take that and let's round robin it. Yeah, I mean, like, so that's the whole point of data cloud. If you saw, like we always say that it's a system of reference, not a system of mastery. So the fact that you have access to all of your source data from different data sources, and that's a good thing, right? So data cloud itself, like if you came to our, I think the identity resolution session, you may have heard of a concept of a key ring, right? So you have basically your, based on your unified individual or unified account, you always have access to all of your source data, so if there are different email addresses, different phone numbers, different contact points, and you basically, at the point of activation, you are picking which one to use based on like source priority and based on. So when you think of data cloud, think of it as it is unifying the data based on the match rules that you specify, but using that unified record, you can get to all of those different values that you have for the individual or account record.
That helps, Arvind. Thank you. And the next one, how do we establish the proper data foundation in Marketing Cloud if we are a client also using synchronized data sources in Service Cloud and creating contacts in Salesforce? What type of segments should we create? Vlad, you want to take that?
Yeah, I might try that. I think the interesting point here is the proper data foundation with regards to like data cloud, I'm assuming, because the aspect of having that synchronized information coming from Service Cloud, you're creating context in Salesforce CRM, which is absolutely fine. What you'll find is there are a couple of other questions similar to that is one thing doesn't necessarily negate the other. So first of all of these tools, they work together and they could be used for different needs. Within Marketing Cloud, it's important to understand that you've got what I like to refer to as a marketing view of the customer. So all the information that you need in order to make decisions for how to communicate with people, how to personalize messages, and so forth. So you need not the entirety of the data model, but only things that really matter for your marketing conversations, if you will, and making obviously decisions. How do you segment people? With regards of segments, it's kind of like the same concept. It depends on what your business cases are and what conversations do you have with customers. If you add Data Cloud into equation, what you will find is it's helpful to have the data almost sitting in different areas, because you have a point of view from the marketing perspective on some of the information. You've got a point of view from CRM and sales management, and Data Cloud gives you the ability to combine all of these data points together to make more advanced decisions around even segments. And therefore, it's easy to do segmentation in Data Cloud because it's designed partially for enabling this specific use case. So it certainly benefits of having like all the information coming into Data Cloud. But at the same time, when it gets down to sending conversations and reacting and responding and continuing them, having the same information sitting in Marketing Cloud like you would have initially would still be beneficial. And therefore, proper foundation simply means you've got your contacts or subscribers, you've got their preferences for consent and preferences for communications, and then you've got all the necessary data points to empower your personalization, content sort of strategy, as well as orchestration of messages, like all the decisions you'll do within the Journey Builder. That would be my take.
Thanks, Vlad. So the next question, Matt, if you want to take that. What are the different use cases of sending data from Marketing Cloud to Data Cloud and from there to Sales Cloud?
I mean, I think Vlad really covered it. I actually would say that there's a lot of crossover between that last question and this question. Specifically, when we're talking about use cases for Marketing Cloud to Data Cloud to CRM, if we're talking about that specific direction and specific use cases, what are we talking about Marketing Cloud generating? It's engagement data. I'm getting information about campaigns that are being sent. I know when someone is opening something or clicking on something or engaging in something. That's the type of data that Marketing Cloud is generating. And so in many cases, many different orgs out there, I might have multiple different subscribers that might be connected to a single CRM contact. How many people out there have a mobile opt-in SMS campaign where you're using a keyword to be able to join an SMS campaign? And is that actually connected to your 18-digit Salesforce CRM user? Possibly. We know that there's a lot of Marketing Cloud accounts out there that don't follow that pattern. And so when I connect this data into Data Cloud, I can unify it. I can understand, oh, this subscriber that has just a phone number as their subscriber key is actually related to this person that has an 18-digit contact ID in CRM. And now I can actually expose all of that engagement data in CRM. That's a perfectly fine and acceptable use case. And so I would say looking at the data that Marketing Cloud is generating and finding ways to kind of expose and then act upon that unified view is certainly a helpful and useful thing.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I would probably only want to add to that is like that whole concept that sometimes I see these questions that people can sort of consider that they use Data Cloud is almost like intermediate data source that combines information from different places and then channels it elsewhere. I think that's just the concept that needs to change in the mindset, because you kind of look, as Matt said, you're articulating the data points that make sense to bring up from Marketing Cloud and Sales Cloud and any other system. Then you use that information to have a really powerful view on all of these data points in the right harmonized, unified way in Data Cloud. And then whatever your results for acting on the data that go and kind of channeled into different applications. So when Marketing Cloud, Sales Cloud in the combination, you would probably send different pieces of information into different target destination, mainly because the usage of that data is going to vary. So you've got the marketing aspect of that, and you've got sales orientated aspect of that. They're two different purposes and two different needs. And therefore, it doesn't mean that you need to send the exact same information into both systems, even though you have it in Data Cloud. The point is you've got Data Cloud, you can access that, you can use it, and then you choose what makes sense to kind of send through from the acting point of view.
Thank you, Vlad. And Arvind, if you want to take this, App Builder components on the home org work great. What about other orgs? Similarly for data graphs.
Sure. I mean, I'll kind of even broad. So there are some capabilities right now that work, really good on or it works on the home data cloud org, right? So if you're talking about app builder itself, that's like your Lightning Web components that you have, those, components. So right now, based on current state, the way that you would is, like Data Cloud has an extensible way to sort of interact with it, right? So using the Connect API, even in your other CRM orgs, you can access the data from a search, view, or display perspective. There are some new capabilities coming, safe harbor wise, which will make that remote org connectivity or different org connectivity a lot more tighter as well. But that's in the world. So right now, yes, like there are some native components that just work within the home org. But if you want to use that in other CRM orgs, you either have to consume it or use things like data action and platform events to do sort of that cross org interaction and orchestration.
Awesome. Thanks, Arvind. And the next question is about fine-tuning performance metrics of smart vehicles. So this is more related to the vehicles and their services and such. Beyond giving timely reminders to customers regarding oil change or service reminders, can Data Cloud be used as a store for ingesting live, high-throughput smart vehicle data from the roads at scale? Can you talk about bandwidth limits to ingest streaming data from millions of smart vehicles on roads in near real time? This could be useful to further fine-tune safety features and performance characteristics of vehicles.
I mean, if we're talking about like autonomous roads with autonomous cars, that's probably something that we haven't really had a chance to test and verify and confirm that this is going to work and scale. But I'll put it into a couple of perspectives here from my point of view. Is number one is collecting data at volume is one of the things that was a design thinking at the very, very start of the product. Like the whole idea of Data Cloud was that we need high throughput, high scale data solution that's going to provide opportunity for us to collect data from varieties of sources at different volumes, different speeds. So all of these considerations have been done from day one. So it's not necessarily a problem. What subsequently comes up as a kind of like decision point is how quickly can you get access to that information. So as you think about trying to visualize what the workflow would look like, is you've got, let's say, different beacons, different devices, different things that emit the signal is transmitted to Data Cloud, it collects it, but there is a process that takes that collection and then puts it into appropriate place in the system, and these sort of processes can take somewhere between 2 minutes up to like 1 hour, depending on nature of integration, what particular use case you use, and what type of information you're sending. So the timings could vary today. That can change, but the timings could vary in terms of making the data available for further consumption. That's one thing to be aware of. If you're trying to pair it up with certain activities and acting on that, then there are pretty much well-defined limits that you can go into help section of the Data Cloud. And if you look under the limitations and guidelines and guardrails, then most of these items are defined in terms of like what's the, for example, a volume of signals and that we can, or triggers that we can emit within a certain period of time through data actions framework. What information can we ingest, how many API calls you can have, and so forth. So depending on the nature of like in details of that particular integration, the subsequent result can vary, and therefore that's something that you can consider. But storage wise, I think that shouldn't be a big problem for us. I don't know if Matt, Arvind, do you have any other thoughts? Or
yeah, I don't think that storage and throughput are going to be the primary concerns here. Data Cloud is a consumption-based model, and when we're talking about data that's at that level and being able to, and the desire, let's say the desire for real-time statistics, real-time engagement, and analytics on that data source are a desire. My primary concern isn't performance, it's cost to serve. And I would want to make sure that there is, that there's enough justified business value in terms of that cost to serve, in terms of the credits that it's going to be consuming. You have to remember that this is Data Cloud lives in a completely different type of cost structure than other Salesforce products in the past. Every time that data is stored and it's accessed and it's processed, it's going to be consuming data services credits, and those credits are going to be at different multipliers depending on the type of activities that are being run. Streaming and real-time based activities are some of the highest cost in terms of our credit multipliers. So while I wouldn't say outright that the cost to serve would be very high, I would have to imagine that there would have to be some serious considerations in terms of value trade-off to be able to examine something like that. There are some things that can be done, and the other thing is, like, if we're actually considering Data Cloud being the source of record for data like that, if it's not landing anywhere else and landing in Data Cloud first, then we lose the opportunity to kind of granularize some of that data. Let's say, for example, we have MuleSoft in the equation, or any other type of, iPaaS tool. If we do that, we might actually have the ability to kind of granularize and sort of create an event bus for Data Cloud. And instead of having to continually pass in row after row after row of perhaps mundane data, we might be able to just pass in outlier data. We might be able to pass in aggregate data and granulars that are a little bit easier for us to be able to gain insights on. And so we don't want to look at Data Cloud as a single tool solution for problems like this when we're dealing with huge, massive amounts of data. We want to definitely understand what else is in the picture and how to make sure that we can use Data Cloud's tools most effectively, especially if there's other tools out there like MuleSoft.
Thanks, Matt. The next question: when I have a Data Cloud hosted in a different org than the org where the Data Cloud is, or where the Salesforce is, how can I read data from Data Cloud to Salesforce CRM using API or querying?
Is a very similar question to the other one about app builder components and how do I access data when I'm in a remote org. So the same stuff that Arvind was saying would apply here. The only thing extra consideration I might add is, since the question is really kind of like being able to access data, how fast can I access data? There are multiple APIs that Data Cloud has in order for you to be able to pull data from a remote org, and some of them do have a little bit more latency. Query API is the most robust API because it allows you to access all of the different DLOs and DMOs within Data Cloud. And as a trade-off, it may take the longest amount of time in order for you to be able to generate a response, especially since if you're going to be querying data across anything that might be engagement related, or some things that aren't even indexed, like in other categorized data. So there would be trade-offs in being able to use a query API. Profile API is different. Profile API is there to pull just information that is related to kind of profiles. It's designed for speed. And if you just need to be able to understand, well, if I need to access my key ring, if I want to know who my unified individual is based off of the ID that I'm in my remote org, Profile API is a great way to go. There's also Calculated Insights API. And so, like, depending on what the actual need of that call out to the Data Cloud org is, you should be using the API that's going to be best suited to kind of solve that problem in the fastest way possible. The other thing that I'm going to say about this is that from a credit standpoint, they are also a little bit different. Aren't they, Vlad, Arvind? I believe that profile and query are slightly different in terms of the credit consumption costs. So that should factor into it too.
Apart from, I'll just add that for like speed of retrieval, what we just launched was something called data graphs, which is sort of meant for, like, you can create subset and it's meant for like more faster retrieval. So that also has its own API as well, the data graphs API. So if you're getting in, like starting this journey, net new, like doing, like I would say also explore that, like from a development perspective, and that's meant for, again, without sort of going into like it's sort of almost a hybrid between the profile and the query API, whereby the profile API was just limited to profile type data, but it gave you a very high performance. Query API gave you the entirety of data cloud data, but it was doing data cloud almost SQL-esque type queries, whereas the data graph API kind of combines those two together in a way.
It's like a specialized indexing of it, and I've been, when we were talking through this internally and I was kind of trying to understand it from the PM or the engineering side, I said, is it like a materialized view? And they were immediate to say, well, no, it's not like a materialized view. However, after talking to other folks that kind of understand the concept, it is kind of like a materialized view. And with the materialized view, it's going to come with its own consumption costs as well, because you have to build that view. So from a credit perspective, there's going to be an impact there as well. As architects in the room, that's always going to be a consideration. So kind of understanding those trade-offs in terms of what type of, if I want to be able to build a super fast highway to this data, what are my trade-offs that are going to be, and how much am I going to be using this super fast highway to this data versus can I wait a couple seconds and take the old dirt road and have a credit hit that's not nearly as high? I hope that analogy makes sense.
That's a great analogy, Matt. I like that.
Can I add 2 cents to that? Because I read the question slightly different way, and it's great to have like few people on the call kind of explaining that. But the one thing that got my attention was like the question is, what is the least time it takes to retrieve data back? And I find that this is coming up in a couple of contexts. One of them is where people consider using Data Cloud as a pass-through data storage. And I just want to make sure that you understand that's not the design purpose of Data Cloud. It's not meant to be used as I'm going to collate and aggregate all the different information and you pass it through, and then you push all this information into some other systems. That's not the design. So that's where, if you're specifically inquiring about that, then that's definitely not the use case. And then from API perspective, like both Arvind and Matt said, but like I want to say is the retrieval is in real time. So you accessing data in real time. The latencies of running the query would really depend on how much information you pull in at any point in time. But ultimately, your access is in real time. You're talking to the data in real time, and you're visualizing it in real time. And therefore, it's up to you to design that how lean the calls should be, and really present it in the context that makes sense. So you don't bring a whole lot of information just because you can. But again, going back into what is your contextual use case, so you minimize the amount of data you go through, and you bring in order to visualize it in whether it's a sales experience or service experience or any other experiences altogether.
Thanks for adding that, Vlad. So moving on to the next question, how can I leverage the foundation models?
Yeah, like I think that's similar to, I think earlier what Vlad, I think had covered the data foundation. So maybe let's, I think that's the same,
Yeah. So if in the best interest of time, Arvind, I would like to move on, if it's fine.
Sure, yeah. Let's move on. So that way, like I know we're already at the half an hour mark.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So what are some recommended validation steps post modeling, segmentation, identity resolution steps to ensure data accuracy and correctness?
yeah, I mean, like I think there are different ways for data accuracy, right? Like in terms of as you ingest stuff, as you more harmonize stuff, as you run through resolution. So I mean, there are some, tools within, not to, like within Data Cloud, like Data Explorer, Profile Explorer. You can use our query API. There are tools on top of that, like the dbeaver, which is a database, query tool. There's also query workspaces. So those are some of the, in terms of how do you validate. But I think the question sort of goes back to even like, what does validation mean to you? Like, what is it that you're looking for validation, right? So as you talk about identity resolution, like is it like a spot checking? I mean, we also like there are some insights also, like I think it's in our help documentation that you can run that'll sort of give you some match rates and some other stuff, right? But I think also like what does correctness mean? Like if you had come to the identity resolution, like you would have seen one thing we said is like there is no like um, there is no like optimal match rate, right? It comes down to your industry, comes down to what type of match tools you use, the type of data that you have. That's why you have the option to create two different uh, identity graphs or rule set to sort of trade, and do that comparison. So I think there's a few things here. Like one is how do you just tactically make sure that yes, I did ingest so and so data, like is it right? I mean, there are like you can use visual inspection stuff like Data Explorer. You can do some automation on top of it using the API or using like tools like dbeaver, query workspaces. Second is like how do I, so I think this needs to be brought into your QA process. Like how do you really validate that what you have ingested from your source systems as well as any insights that you have run, right, is proper. So I think and I would almost break this down into two parts. One is tactically, just how do I QA and just make sure. Second is how do I just ensure that like my segment logic is right or my identity resolution. I think that's sort of a bit more of a holistic question, like based on your business use cases, like I would say.
Thanks for all the details, Arvind. That is helpful. And the next question, I think we covered most part of it, about how the data cloud usage is metered and also the storage limits. If there's nothing more to add to that, I will move on to the next question. So we are using CDP to.
Is there anything you wanted to add there, Vlad?
No, sorry. No, I just, I misunderstood the question. No, all good.
So we are using CDP to capture web and mobile data using the SDK. With users who do not log in or have a user ID, we are creating them as unknown. Can we get this data into SFMC? It looks like there needs to be an email, mobile, or device ID to get them in SFMC.
I can talk a little bit about this one. I mean, from on the surface, I mean, there's a couple things I'm reacting to. First of all, if we are collecting anonymous data, the only really key that we have would be like a device ID or a cookie ID. And being able to, we need something else of value in order to be able to move that into Marketing Cloud. We need some type of PII. And, this kind of comes down to, is it possible for me to bridge this device ID? So when a person goes from anonymous to known, will I be able to use that device ID as a bridge and then unify on that? And we get this question especially with things like Marketing Cloud personalization out there. There is no native bridge right now in this connector. And so what that means is that when a person goes from anonymous to known within Marketing Cloud personalization, it's sending a new stream of data, and it's containing a new identifier for that individual. And what we kind of lose is the bridge between the anonymous user and the known user. There's workarounds. We've kind of published a few different workarounds for this. I would say it's proceed with caution when ingesting anonymous data, not just for this reason, but for the other reason being that you're going to have a lot of anonymous data, and you may not have many use cases for that anonymous data when you ingest it into Data Cloud, unless you can hopefully tie it to a known profile. And you, from an ethical standpoint, if you can pull something like a MAC address or like a, an IMEI number, I mean, I don't know if enriching data through sources like that, there might be ethical and privacy concerns there. So I would say there's certainly ways to do it. But I would say right now, what's missing right now is native support for anonymous to known, and it's going to come with a pretty heavy volume impact in terms of lots of anonymous data you may not be able to use outside of analytics, of course.
That's a great word of caution, Matt. We all need to consider. Arvind, you want to add anything? Arvind or Vlad?
No, I think Matt covered it well. But I think there is, I mean, I don't want to I think covered it well. I mean, I think if you have different tools like SFMC, MCP, and Data Cloud in play, I mean, I think just holistically think of in terms of what's gonna, play what. There is the interactions SDK. Are you going to feed data into Data Cloud first, into MCP first? I think that's a big, so there are the way that you create your solution is going to be it's going to be a key part in terms of how this gets solutioned out overall.
I would jump in and just add to that, because I think I've got a similar question with one of the recent discussions. There is a point with regards to activation specifically. So if you want to send an audience, for example, a segment of people, your unidentified people, into Marketing Cloud with intent to communicate with them, if that's the nature of this question, then the answer would be no, because we do require to have at least a contact point for an individual when we're sending segments to Marketing Cloud. If you think conceptually about the purpose of each of the different tools within the whole solution stack, the Marketing Cloud is a system of engagement. It's not the system of storage, or it's not the system of record per se, and therefore everyone that we're sending to the destination is supposed to have some kind of point for us to be able to have a conversation with them. If you don't have that, then in our sense, in the way that the application was designed, is there's no need to send anyone anywhere, because again, the Data Cloud is not meant to become an orchestrator of distribution of the data across different data points, right? We're just collecting it, we're structuring it, we're providing access to that, and then we acting on that. So within the action flow, in the way that Marketing Cloud is designed, if you don't bring an email, there is no need for us to talk to you, and there is no means for us to talk to you. So email being email or phone number or device ID, we can't really send you any communication. And therefore, purely from sending that information to the Marketing Cloud, there is no real meaning in doing so. If you kind of thinking about the journeys where you've got anonymous people coming in, somehow they navigate through different experiences potentially, and then being unlocked, the point of them making sense to be present in Marketing Cloud is the moment when you can unlock the conversation opportunity with them. And therefore, that's the reason mainly why you won't have that option. So it certainly is a consideration.
Yeah. And I would say more than just do I have the PII to support a conversation? Do I have consent to conduct this conversation? That's another really important one too. Just because I may have been able to scrape someone's email address does not mean that that person wants to be contacted. And so consent, I would say, is another really important one when considering moving that data into Marketing Cloud.
Thanks, Matt. And the next one, when working in the banking industry, what are the different use cases to use as POV?
I think Arvind should take this one.
Which use cases to use this? I mean, there is, thanks, Matt. No, I mean, within, again, Data Cloud, like we say, right? You'll hear us say every Salesforce customer or every customer needs a Data Cloud. I mean, across banking and financial services, even right now, Data Cloud has had tremendous traction within Salesforce, within our FinServ client as well. So they can be from retail banking to wealth banking. And, I can think of different use cases, right? One is, how do I show my banker a unified view of of their clients and all of their different accounts, assets. It's not uncommon for your enterprise banking clients to have different Salesforce orgs, as well as their banking systems, their in-house transaction systems. How do I get all that data unified, get consolidated, act on it? So that's just one, right? To giving them that unified view. Second is, as those transactions like deposit events happen, or credit card transactions happen, or those can be trigger points whereby you are using things like data action to create a proactive task, or create a opportunity, or create a lead for your end user. So I would say, this is really about, if your client, or in your scenario, like in this case, the banking scenario, you are struggling with either bad data or not having that unified view, and how do I act on it, right? Data Cloud would be a very good use case for that.
Thanks, Arvind. So the next question, listing the different parts of the data cloud, like AWS data streams, ingestion API data streams, mobile and web data streams, data lake, and data model. Why are we using the Salesforce metadata API?
It's really a simple answer, because we build Data Cloud on Salesforce platform, and therefore anything you configure in terms of metadata access, you're going to have metadata API. Like, there's no real extra magic behind it, I think.
Only extra consideration I'll throw in there is that when we talk, like, is Data Cloud administered through core CRM? Yes. Does that use metadata? Yes. Is all of that administration available within the metadata API? Not all of it. We are working towards parity to make sure that every single component of Data Cloud can be administered through the metadata API. And I call out the metadata API because we don't always want to be able to click buttons in order to change configuration within Data Cloud. Key rotation is a really important one. If I have new access and like secret keys for all of my S3 sources, whatever source I might have, well, I might want to create an automated process to be able to rotate those keys really fast. And I don't want to have to go in and click buttons in order to manage that change. So using the metadata API would be very helpful for that. And so, the way that metadata works across all of Data Cloud is that, different sections are getting added to that metadata API. It's its own entity, the API. And so if you look today, there may not be complete coverage across the metadata API for administering Data Cloud, but it's very good coverage. And our goal is to kind of have that coverage gap closed as soon as possible. I don't know if I have an end date for that, because frankly, metadata changes all the time.
That's great to know,
It may be a
Matt.
continually moving target.
And moving on to the next one, for an organization which is already having mules of CRMA, BI, and Informatica, how can Data Cloud be useful?
I think they just missed the memo that they do need it. But practically, though, realistically, no. I think I might jump in and answer this. One of the things I encourage people to think when they had trying to make a decision without us forcing it on them is, you look at the existing stack, and the Data Cloud, the way we're trying to bring it to the table is, we don't necessarily want to rip and replace what the investments have been made so far in the organization. That's why we've got these great features that bring your own lake as one of the examples, where we want to take all the investment made into data solutions and just bring them into unified place. The whole reasoning for doing that, though, is very different. Most of the time, and it's again based on the analysis and feedback from our sort of field within our company, a lot of people from solution engineering were discovering that plenty of good tools on the market, they still create data silo, and we're not unlocking them for the opportunity to make cross data actions on all of that information that's stored within the organization. And therefore, the first question you ask yourself, in my opinion, should be, is there a use case that I cannot empower through the solution that I have today with regards to data? Is there something that is still behind the wall, behind the barrier? I need to go and talk to a different team. There is no process that can help me automate and streamline the workflow. Then potentially you should evaluate what we can bring to the table. Yeah. If you fully qualified, if you're fully satisfied with the existing solution, there is no need to really go up and like, okay, let's replace Informatica or MuleSoft or anything else, because again, it's like the tools are different and they serve different purposes. Informatica can have multiple solutions. It could be a middleware solution. It could be a bit of a data consolidation solution. So depending on which one you've got, the questions could vary, but altogether still the same answer. If you don't have anything that you can't achieve today within your organization with regards to data, then potentially you're just not there yet. Like there isn't a real business need. If you do have some challenges, then that's really, in my opinion, a good indication to go and start exploring. How can we help you solve that problem? And then evaluating whether it's going to be a replacement or really a rather extension of what you've got, so that we can get fast to market. We can give you an easy solution that's going to go live pretty quick, and then you can then continue deciding on how much of that you're going to re-architect, re-engineer, or just simply extend what you've got with Data Cloud.
Yeah, and time to market, I think, Vlad, you called out is a really important one. Just because you have all of the pieces to be able to put these things together doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be easy, doesn't mean that it's going to be quick, and it doesn't mean that it's going to be cheap. And so, the reason why we saw value in creating a tool like Data Cloud is because we do see a lot of improvements in terms of time to value. And so that the problem sometimes that might be solved is it may not be, can we do it, but can we do it at a agility that's going to actually bring us value. And a lot of organizations really are sort of overwrought with high cost to serve on being able to do these things today. And so being able to give organizations declarative tools to be able to do a lot of this is really quite powerful and valuable.
I mean, and not to hammer home this point, just because I think this comes up, like I think one thing you'll see us even talk about, like Data Cloud is acting on data, acting on AI in the flow of your work, right? So it's not, so you're in your CRM, you're acting. I mean, again, I would say, right, there are the tools you mentioned, MuleSoft, amazing ETL transformation tool for integration, CRMA, right? It's analytics. I would say a Data Cloud should never replace a MuleSoft, should never replace like a BI tool. It's not meant to be. It's meant for so that you can act on your data, act on AI in the flow of work. Your users are in your CRM instance, are in your Service Cloud, Sales Cloud, and Data Cloud is just making it that much more stronger, right? So I think that's the lens. So especially if you already have these tools, and like I would say, you need to, like, what is the use case that you're trying to, don't get Data Cloud like for the sake of getting Data Cloud, but what use case or business problem that you're trying to solve for, and how would you measure that?
That's a great call out, Arvind. So given that we already have a lot of tools and getting Data Cloud, the point of value, this is very important to consider. Moving on to the next question, what is the solutioning recommendation with respect to Einstein Studio predictive models versus using calculated insights to derive insights such as churn?
Yeah, sure. And I can take that. I mean, again, without getting to sort of think, I mean, there are different ways to get insight on your data, right? So even with our Einstein Studio, we have low code using Einstein Studio Model Builder. We have pro code using build your own model. So using things like SageMaker, Google Vertex. Calculated insight, again, it's more of a SQL prescriptive logic builder, right? So you're using SQL. When people think of predictive or ML type models, machine learning types, there's usually some sort of an algorithm or some sort of machine learning element involved. Calculate inside, you're basically creating SQL type logic to kind of prescribe, what you want. So there are different uses for all of that, right? I mean, ML by itself, be it low code or pro code, is basically doing some sort of algorithm based on, the years of sort of like, be it random forest algorithm or one of those that's running, right? So classification. So I think there are different paradigms. So it's not quite apples to apples. Now you might find that I can do something similar using calculate insight, then yes, but you are basically then creating that logic based on what you know.
That helps. Thanks, Arvind. And the next question, I think it's related to the identifying the required fields, where or how we can identify the required fields of data lake objects or the data model objects.
I can probably answer that. So for DLO, when you're doing the configuration, there's usually primary key that you need to define. And then if you've got the engagement type, you've got the additional datetime attribute that you need to specify. For DMO, normally when you go into the DMO, there's a red asterisk that shows you this is a primary key. And if you do have special objects, for example, contact point email, contact point address, contact point phone, if you need to use them in the identity resolution, there's a subset of fields that have to be mapped in order for these objects to be mapped. If you're not sure about which ones and if you've mapped them or not, you will see when you're doing the mapping on the top right next to the name of the object, there'll be a little warning yellow triangle that tells you, hey, there is some fields that you haven't mapped and therefore this object will not be used for identity resolution. But you can go into the documentation and the identity resolution, and there's a document outlining all of these mandatory fields that you need to map for these specific objects. The rest of the stuff is optional. It's entirely up to your use cases and what you need to see in the data model.
Thanks, Vlad. And I think this question is covered during the sessions or during this session now, how to load bulk data from the data cloud into core Salesforce. Or if you want to briefly touch upon this, please.
Matt, I can.
I mean, I think actually this is an opportunity for the three of us to talk this through, because I think generally speaking, we would say that data cloud is not meant to do bulk egress of data. But there are sometimes cases when you want to be able to have some of that data in your CRM org. There could be a use case, and we're not going to say that there isn't a valid use case for being able to do that. And what do you do? Certainly there's patterns out there to be able to do it. And one that I'm trying to understand from, and this is why I like getting to work with Vlad and Arvind, is because I get to learn about new stuff all the time. DFU, Data Factory. I don't know if that is a viable pattern for being able to do an extract. And I'm not sure, Vlad, Arvind, have you guys explored this at all? Is it available?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll say this, right? I'll just data cloud is not meant as a bulk egress tool. So I'll just throw it out there. So that's not a pattern that we want to support. Like, hey, bring in all your data and then let's do a bulk egress of my DLOs. Right now, the only way to get data out of data cloud is through the things we covered, is through either an activation, which is tied to a segment, through data actions, which as events happen or a change data can trigger an action out, or through the API. So those are the only three ways that you can sort of get data out itself, right? And then so I would say in this, what is the use case for loading this bulk data? And the only reason I say that, right, I've seen sometimes they say in my Service Cloud instance, I want to show values from my data cloud, like a lifetime value or some sort of unified cases back in my Service Cloud. Think about then, does the data need to live in your Salesforce org? Does it need to be stored in an S object? Because several times you might suffice with just at the point that you're interacting in your core org to go and pull the data from data cloud, from a display perspective, right? Because it's your call center agent, it's your sales rep, it's your whoever is your CRM user. They just want access to the data at the point of interaction with the Salesforce org. So that's, so always think like, what is the use case that you're trying to solve for? To kind of Matt's point now, there might be some scenario that the data actually needs to live in Salesforce org. And by live in Salesforce org, I mean, it needs to be in an S object, within Salesforce. So in those cases, like stuff like data actions or CRM enrichment through the copy field capabilities are some ways, or through a segment activation, right, is to get data out. So I think this is where I would almost like, if I was having a real-time interaction, would see what is the use case to kind of extract or bulk data and to store it in Salesforce, rather than go from there.
I would just reading up some comments, right? Like George said, there's a good point. There's a lot of the times, and Arvind, you mentioned it as well, like calculated insights. That's a very, very good use case, in my opinion, where we want something that is produced in Data Cloud to be exposed into any other application. And I'm just not going to just call it just Salesforce CRM, because in practice, there could be multiple points where you want to send it and consume it. I love the fact that Arvind said, I think we need to change the way that we look at data, because as a vendor, the fact that we created Data Cloud is an extension of our two different types of databases now within the platform. And therefore, we don't necessarily want you to kind of think of the pattern where you just distribute the data from one place to another. The way it's sort of meant to be done is the information that needs to be stored in this object, it sits in this object. Everything that then comes into Data Cloud, for whatever reasons justify that from the design perspective, when you produce something in Data Cloud, we want you to access this information, not necessarily copy it around, because then you get to the point where you need to introduce so many different workflows where the data needs to be propagated consistently. So you ultimately saying you're not just recalculating it on Data Cloud, but every single time when this change, you need to go up and trigger activity that was going to go and update the contact or an account or an opportunity. I mean, this is doable. We've got events, flows, we've got opportunities to create triggers that effectively as a data action will inform CRM, and CRM you can trigger the flow that will update particular record. But combination of different tools today is probably more suitable to think through. It's like data enrichment, if you've got related list, if you've got maybe some of these data actions to inform and update some of the CRM objects within the with Salesforce CRM in order to represent that.
Thanks, Vlad. It seems it's a question by Sharath. Sharath, you want to add more details to that?
Yeah. So when we are getting the data like account and contact from different sources, we want to unify all that data, then segment it accordingly. And in our organization, we have 40 different Salesforce instances. Each set of data, depending on the segmentation, need to go to unique Salesforce orgs. As of now, there are other tools that are doing it, and we are trying to see if Data Cloud can solve this problem.
Yeah. And I would say, like, Sharath, like, I think going back to, and I think that's like one of the reason that we built Data Cloud, right? I think because it was finding whether there were cross-org data being moved around with this new paradigm, right? So I guess coming back to what is the use case, like, what is it that you're trying to do? Like, why does this data need to live in that? Like, what is the driving force behind that?
I hope that helps, Sharath.
Yep, thank you.
And moving on. Go ahead, Vlad.
No, sorry, I just want to say, like, this 40 orgs is a very good example where we specifically don't want you to go and copy it around, because the effort is going to maintaining that image correctly is going to increment with any additional object you add and so forth. So it's changing potentially the pattern from copying across to being able to simply surface that up in the context of the work, whether it's a service console or sales agent view, even like marketers view when they go up and look and work with different objects in CRM. It's absolutely doable today.
It is like the core account object. So how can we not load it into Salesforce and still work? Like, it is the core object, master objects, not the artifacts.
Yeah. So if you can have custom Lightning Web Components that simply retrieve information on the fly from Data Cloud based on your account ID. Then you can showcase any other related, through even unification, any other related entities that you want to present from different orgs. But again, like the point more, as Arvind said correctly, the use case need to be the forefront of that decision, and then you just identify what information you need to present for what activity, I guess, or what is the business process with the data, because simply copying it around doesn't really answer why you're doing that. It only just tells you what you do, but not why you're doing that. So if you know why you need this information, what type of information, then you can, as I said, orchestrate that retrieval from any of the orgs. You can deploy the same components into any of these 40 orgs again, but ultimately you're talking to a single data store rather than distributing that information every single time when there is updates, when there's a change, when any other objects are added to the story. Like, it just becomes more and more complex to maintain. We feel that we give you an option to access that in real time, because it's a real-time retrieve. You can do it at scale, and there is no problem with just not storing it, but rather accessing it and showcasing it. If you do have like a good use case, let us know. We'd love to learn.
Yeah, I'll stop with this one thing. It is not just viewing it, it is the account data. Based on that, we will have to create the opportunities, tasks, meetings, and lot of other artifacts in the CRM.
Sure.
Yeah.
Then you're probably looking into slightly different workflow, because in that case, you're looking into triggering a business process in the subsequent CRM orgs after the reconciliation and harmonization of your data from multiple orgs. And to me, this is more like a like to the pattern of data action that can trigger an information into respective org and say, hey, create other activities, through the flow. So that's, again, doable, but without copying the information necessarily. Just provide it as a part of the payload within the data action calls, not necessarily copying the information of the source account.
Okay, we can move on. Thank you.
Thanks, Vlad. The next one, how near real time is the data that we see in data enrichment related list? Can we slice and dice this data through out of the box components?
It's a data action that feeds these, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think calculated insights is data action. I think the related list itself, I think it's a metadata, but I think that's a real-time view from Data Cloud. So once you set it up, I think when you create a related list, there is a standard list. I think that by default, because of performance, it's the last 7 days, I want to say. And then there is the dynamic list where you can apply your own filters as well, right? So that is, once you create that related list, that's basically doing a real-time view, like within CRM from your Data Cloud, tenant.
Thanks, Arvind.
Yeah.
So the
But
next
to add
question,
to that, like, because we use the word CRM and enrichments, there is another capabilities called CRM enrichment as well for calculated insight. That, in that case, that is a data action that is actually copying that calculated insight field value from Data Cloud to a field that you specify in your CRM object, in the REST object.
that helps. So next one, can you share how zero ETL with Snowflake works with Data Cloud?
I try. So zero ETL is all the rage, right? You're hearing Databricks talk about it. You're hearing Snowflake talk about it. And it's just allows a schema to be the first step in being able to establish a connection between systems. And so before we start talking, we try to figure out how we understand our different data schemas. So zero ETL for something like Snowflake is, without getting into, and frankly, I don't know at an engineering level how they're going to be able to go out and describe that schema. I'm sure that there's an open API process that allows them to be able to load that schema for the end user in Salesforce. you set up the connection. You set up the connection to Snowflake, and then what you're able to view is, you know, the objects that are available within that schema. And then what happens is it gets treated like a virtual DLO. You can use it, you can harmonize that into your data model. You can process that data with a calculated insight. You can segment it, you can activate it. It behaves as though it lives within Data Cloud. The only difference is it doesn't. And it is almost like a, how can I describe it? Like a lookup field or a formula field, right? So the data doesn't live there. It gets accessed when you need to look at it. And so what happens is it goes out to your federated source. It goes out to Snowflake. It writes a quick query in order to be able to access that data from Snowflake, and it pulls it back into your Data Cloud org as if it had it. There's lots of advantages to that. Certainly, we want to try to find ways to be able to make sure that people that have a footprint in data lakes and data warehouses can still find value in Data Cloud. We find that most people are loading data that is outside of Salesforce into Data Cloud because that's the data that is least adjacent to it right now and could frankly provide a lot of information and context within Salesforce. So naturally, we want to try to find ways to be able to get that data in as easily as possible without having to think about ripping and replacing. But there's considerations to that, obviously. And one of them is this is an integration that doesn't know what is on the other end. So when I create my federated connection to Snowflake, Snowflake doesn't know what Data Cloud is going to be doing with that data. It just tells it what the schema is. And when it requests information within that schema, it answers it. And so if I'm changing my schema in Snowflake, and I've built dependencies on that data in Data Cloud, and I change my schema in Snowflake, well, that could cause stuff to break, and we're going to get errors in that process because the data that we need to access in Snowflake is no longer there. And so this is the same in every other instance when you're trying to integrate platform across platform. They don't always know what each system is going to be doing with that data and that schema, and you just have to be coordinated in order to make these things work. That's it. That's my summary of that. Vlad, Arvind, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, not much. I mean, the very simple thing is like, as you said, you've got the schema, you present it. We don't copy the data. Like I always kind of remind myself, like the very easy terminology for that is the zero ETL basically means that you've got the information sitting in a data solution, and all we're doing is just exposing that into Data Cloud as if it's natively already been copied, integrated, stored in the database, and then surfaced up as a data lake object. So we're taking away all these steps for extracting, transforming, loading. We effectively just going, hey, here you go. You can just access that as if it's a native object in Data Cloud, which is, great value add. There's no time involved into reintegrating, and we accessing it in real time.
Thanks, Vlad. And the next question, I think this is about the connected systems between CRM, SFMC, and Data Cloud, where SFMC and the Sales Cloud is also integrated with MC Connect. Synchronized objects are coming into the Marketing Cloud. So what I'm seeing is that all data should be sent to Data Cloud, and then the associated data actions will be triggered from there. So since the Data Cloud is the system of reference, I imagine clients want to update CRM when a customer meets the criteria that leads to the data action. If we send the data to trigger an email from SFMC and then update CRM, the synchronization between the platform may trigger a second email, as now the system of record has been updated with the criteria match. So when implementing Data Cloud, should the clients turn off the synchronization between CRM and SFMC?
I say no, but it's more complicated and nuanced than that.
I support that.
You know, the connector between CRM and Marketing Cloud, it works great for a lot of things, and it works great when all you need to do is create a one-way integration between CRM and Marketing Cloud. If I have a case that gets escalated and I want to be able to do something within Marketing Cloud, fantastic. I can create a journey for that. A flow gets launched and boom, we're up and running. No extra work needed. I wouldn't go and create a data action in Data Cloud to be able to figure out what's happening in this source system, not do any enrichment, not do any unification on it, and then simply send it over to Marketing Cloud. That sounds like an overbuilt solution to me. And so we have this direct integration between these two platforms. There's a lot that you can do with it. And I would say when there is a need to be able to enrich, when there's a need to be able to unify and gain context for things that are outside of those two platforms, that's when I think Data Cloud offers something of value. Beyond that, I would say, and so I wouldn't turn off synchronized data extensions. I wouldn't turn off, the ability to create journeys. I think that we are a long, long, long way away from being able to replace all of that great functionality in the connector. And so when it comes to your decision making and when do I build, and worried about triggering different conditions, I think it's a good approach to be cautious, especially if you're starting to use a system of reference like Data Cloud to kind of trigger a data action. So I think being able to do your due diligence on that and understanding when you might have a situation where that might happen is certainly well worth the time investigating.
That's great, Matt. Need to know that. And the next one, I think you already answered this. Why Data Cloud when there is Tableau and few other platforms? So moving on to the next one. If you use web SDKs to track web behavior, is it the same SDK as in MCP? Can you later on start using personalization and use the same web SDKs, or will there be issues?
I can cover it. It does use the same SDK, and there is a bit of an overlap between the functionality and the way the triggers. So in terms of, like, in the simple term, because it's a broader topic to discuss, but to give you an idea is you can only send information collected by SDK into one destination target. So you'll have to make a decision whether you're sending it to the Marketing Cloud personalization or you're sending it into the Data Cloud. That's the main distinction between them. Practically, they function alike. Events, system triggering, sitemap, it all behaves the same, but because there are two different sitemaps, that's ultimately result in potentially discrepancies of behavior. There are ways around that, but again, that should be a starting point to think through. If you want to have both products, have a look. We do have some guidelines. We do have some sessions. Christopher was running it. We know we've got a few more details sharing around that specifically, but all in all, if you have both products, you have to make a decision where you're sending information to on a given page.
Thanks, Vlad. And the next one, what are we doing to address the increasing noise around the composability narrative and how it's not all roses as promised by other vendors? So do we have some cheats, Intel docs, etc. to address and combat that effectively?
I don't think we've got anything published for, like in the open space. Look, I'll put it this way. We, like as a company, we don't tend to go into, formalizing and publishing in a public domain any competitive analysis or kind of like the cheat sheets or battles cards. Sometimes I've heard that name referred to as well. The point for us is we always reiterate the value of our solution. If you look into that, it has to become more or less a talk track that you can inherit and build for yourself to explain why would you choose a platform vendor versus a bunch of different platforms and solutions that someone has to put together, build them up, and there is that total cost of ownership that later comes into play because you have to maintain all of that. So what skills do you need? How many people in your team supposed to be owning all of these different solutions? And again, like there's a lot of different things that, let's say for the love's sake, maybe you can do most of the work that you do in Data Cloud with the magic of spreadsheets, it will take you 2 months to achieve to something that we do within, let's say, 10 minutes. But it's doable, right? And I look at that as a similar analogy. If there is a cost saving factor, quite often people miss the point of that total cost of ownership, skill set, team, and how it all comes together. These composable solutions are great as a point solution. And if that's the problem you're trying to solve, then potentially you just need to evaluate the use case and say, yeah, maybe Data Cloud is not right for us or not right for the customer because it's just not mature enough to take advantage of it. But if you go up into a completely different approach to solving their business problems, if you look at the use cases and you see that there's not just one tool at play, we're not just collecting the data in real time from the website. There is 5 other systems at play, different access permissions, different controls, different volumes. Then all of a sudden you start seeing the value of the platform solution that gives you an opportunity to not just ingest all of that, but take actions and continuously integrate into other business processes. So holistic story and narrative usually overcomes the value propositions of these composable vendors. It's not necessarily to say that we're going to beat them, because that's one of the things that you go, if you do feature by feature parity comparison, that in some cases you might find we might not necessarily be doing some things that the other products might do. And again, it's okay. We reflect what majority of our customers' needs are. We have a strong vision from the product leadership in terms of where they want to take our solutions. And as you hopefully see now with the last 3 years, the evolution of how Data Cloud becomes the forefront of the entire platform, right? It's no longer just a product, a cloud that we built on its own. It really is a foundation for everything else we're going to be doing in the future in the platform. And therefore, kind of comparing these tools, it's almost like saying, well, what if I just try to replace that particular product, put it into place that Data Cloud stays in the Salesforce stack? You can take away the Salesforce, but think about like business line applications. You talk about different data sources, different systems in the organization, and then you've got these composable solutions that just coming in and says there's a gear here, is it gear there? Maybe they will achieve some results, but like, is it safe? Is it secure? And I mean, plethora of other things that come to mind. So that would be my kind of way to explain that.
I mean, and I think you covered it well, but I think, the whole composable has taken, like it's also a very different thing. And that's why, one thing, right, like where customers find success with Data Cloud is when they're using that with some other Salesforce cloud, right? So, so like I would say, if your customer or your business doesn't have any Salesforce footprint at all, then Data Cloud may not be the right solution for you at this point in time. Like it gets its most value when you already have the CRM, Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud, Commerce Cloud. So I think that's when it is the fact that it's an integrated solution with clicks, no code. Just like, the same reason that we've had such great traction in the CRM space. And that's what sort of Data Cloud greatly enhances that and further covers that. So I personally would not get into like a feature battle, nitpicking does it do this, but look at it from a very holistically, what problems are you trying to solve? Do you or does your customer already have a Salesforce footprint? And then sort of take the conversation from there.
The only thing I would add to that is when we're talking about composable stacks and we're talking about specifically a composable CDP, what parts of what Data Cloud does would you say it could live without in a composable solution? And anybody that's out there that's saying, I have a composable CDP, well, what is it? What is it doing that it should be doing that you can swap in and out pieces of and still call it a CDP or a data lake, data warehouse? That's what I would challenge on. And it's looking at parts. It's like you can absolutely build a car by being able to buy aftermarket parts. And I'm sure you might be able to find amazing aftermarket parts for each little component of your vehicle, but that's really going to take a lot of time and effort in order to make that thing to come together. We built the car. I'm not sure if that analogy works. That's
I think so. I mean, that's true. I like the comparison because we do sell a car. You know, it might not
yeah,
be the make and model that you really fully enjoy. It fits your needs. You know, you might have a different preference for leisure drive versus your business drives and so forth. But we build and sell a car. We don't sell parts per se that you can fit into other cars and make them kind of swappable in and out, as Matt said. So I think it is a good analogy. Just you might like it, you might not. It might fit, it might not. But that's what we do, and we don't necessarily want to go into that level of like, let's compare if every single part is the same, or does equally produce the same outcome, or fits equally into all the different solutions.
That's
I'm
great.
going to use
Thanks,
that.
Vlad. So that brings us to the last question. So this is about the roadmap for the data cloud certification. That's what I understand from this year. So certification or the data cloud roadmap, if you have any insights that can be shared.
Yeah, so
it's
I
a
think,
quick one.
yeah, go for it, Map. But I think this is to do with our FedRAMP certification to use with government cloud. And so I think that is, it's not there yet, but that is in the works and we are actively, so I think as long or as and when that gets publicly announced, like we'll be sure to share it. But it is on the roadmap and our teams are working on that.
Yeah. On that note, I mean, yeah, FedRAMP certification, government cloud compatibility, all the DMOs that would be coming there in through government cloud roadmap. The other thing that's on the roadmap is, compatibility for native DMOs within various industries. So each of the different industry clouds have a specific roadmap for adoption. There's value in being able to use a standard DMO as we start to move towards being able to have context aware AI. Certainly a standard DMO that is aware of what it is could be of more value for things that might be predictive or generative. And so there is value in being able to use a standard DMO over custom. Trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to add to that outside of industries. Shield and encryption. This comes up. Support for Shield and support for bring your own key encryption is also on the roadmap. I would say probably roughly same time frame in terms of GovCloud, FedRAMP, Safe Harbor. We're kind of looking within this fiscal for support on those things, as we've heard.
That's great. And that brings to the end of the questions that we have already received. And we're also over time. And thank you, Matt, Vlad, and Arvind for your patience and also sharing your insights here. And thank you very much for being part of this bootcamp. So, and thanks everyone. Go ahead, Arvind.
And I was just going to say, thank you, JB, for organizing this, and thanks to the, all the folks who stayed on, look like just seeing the breadth of questions, obviously like you guys are out there trying to learn and upskilling yourself. So thank you for investing in data cloud and, trying to get the knowledge. And yeah, and thanks for organizing this like for the broader community. So
yeah, and again, this wouldn't be possible without your all of your support.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hope to see you all again. We hope to see if some of you are heading out to TDX. Arvind and I will be there. Vlad, you're traveling. You're going to Sydney, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to be in Sydney World Tour next week. If
Yeah.
you're around, find me. We'll be happy to have a chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, if you're in the partner space, you can reach out to us on Slack, or reach out to us over LinkedIn. I'm sure all of our social stuff is shared out there as well. So we're super happy to see this interest being generated in the community. We absolutely couldn't be able to kind of tell this story about the value that we see within Data Cloud without you. So thanks for coming in and giving us such great questions and your attention for this time today.
It would be a great opportunity to meet you, Matt, Arvind, and I have met Vlad. Hope to meet again. I'll be missing the events and missing the opportunity to meet, but hoping it happens soon. And I have one last announcement. So we do have some swag, 3 certification vouchers. So we have limited time. So what I'm going to do is send out an email to the email that I shared just now. It's jyotsna.bitra@trailblazerscgl.com, and include the subject line as Data Cloud 12-day certification bootcamp. And tell me why, how you would use the certification voucher, and send an email to me within the next 30 minutes. So I will pick the 3 winners and 1 swag winner. So make sure you note down the email ID and the subject line. So with that, we're going to wrap up this session and also this series. And thanks everyone once again. And we hope to see you again. We're going to continue this journey with the deep dive series. So make sure that you join the Phoenix Marketers Group page so you get notified of all the published events. And thank you. And we hope to see you again. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.